Hey y'all, it's your girl T. Welcome back to Purpose Through Pain. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if you've already been rocking with me since episode 1, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting me. And thank you for taking this journey with me. This episode 5, and today we're going to have a conversation about something that I believe a lot of us have experienced at one point in our lives. When you outgrow people. Now, listen, have you ever had somebody in your life that you used to talk to all the time? Somebody you used to laugh with, hang out with, tell everything to. And then one day, you realize something has changed. You really can't explain it. There wasn't necessarily an argument. Nobody necessarily betrayed anybody. You just don't connect the same anymore. And sometimes we don't know what to call that. We start questioning ourselves. Did I change? Did they change? Did I do something wrong? Or maybe the answer is you grew. Because growth doesn't always come with a big announcement. Sometimes growth is quiet. Sometimes it's realizing that the conversations you used to entertain, it don't even interest you anymore. Sometimes it's realizing that the things you used to tolerate are things you can no longer accept. And sometimes it's realizing that you don't want to keep going back to the same places, the same situations, and the same cycles that you've been praying to get out of. And here's the part that can be hard. You can love somebody and still outgrow them. You can care about somebody and still know that you can't take them with you into your next season. And that doesn't make you better than them at all. Like, it doesn't. It means that it doesn't mean that it make you like better than them. And it also doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It doesn't mean you are like, being whatever they think you are being in this moment. That you are changing. Everything around you seems to be changing. And you're growing and evolving. Listen, it simply means that sometimes your life is changing. And when your life changes, sometimes the people around you change too. So today, we're going to talk about what it really means to outgrow people. Why it can hurt so much. Why sometimes, you feel guilty for choosing, yourself. We choose ourselves. And how to know when it's time to release relationships instead of just forcing them, to stay the same. You can't keep forcing yourself to stay in a situation that you want to come up out of, And listen, this is not a community where we pass judgment. And if some people chose to, stay where they are and they're happy and they're in their peace, then hey, that's good. But you have, people such as myself. I changed. I'm growing. I'm becoming. Because, baby, listen, sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is accept that everybody who walked with you in one season wasn't meant to walk with you in the next one. So, look, get comfortable and come talk to me. Right? We gonna have a conversation today. because this is purpose through pain. And where you start, it's not where you're going to finish. All right, y'all. So let's get to it. Let's talk about it. Because when I say I outgrew somebody, that that listen, what does that really mean? Like when you like, oh yeah, I outgrew this person or I outgrew that race. What does it really mean? And I think sometimes we get the wrong idea about what it means to outgrow people. Outgrowing somebody doesn't necessarily mean you wake up one morning or one day and say, "Man, listen, I don't want them. I don't want you in my life no more." Now, you may have some people that can do that. Wake up the next day if we're blessed to get another day, or switch it off. But sometimes it's much quieter than that. Sometimes you just start noticing that you're not the same person you used to be. The things that used to matter, like the things that used to matter to you, it don't matter as much no more. The places you used to go, you don't even want to be going no more. Anymore, you don't want to go, you don't want to be there. The conversations you used to have, don't even want to have them anymore. Pointless. And maybe you're not interested in being around negativity the way you used to be. Maybe you're interested in you're not interested in gossiping. Wanting to be into what's happening. Maybe you're not interested in arguing. Maybe you're not interested in explaining yourself all the time. Maybe you're finally at a place where you value your peace more than you value being accepted. And let me tell you something. That kind of growth will change your relationships. Because when you starting to change, when you start changing, the people around you have a choice. They can either grow with you, they can respect the person you're becoming, or they can keep expecting you to be the person you used to be. And sometimes that's where the tension starts. Because people get comfortable with the old version of you. Some people don't want to see you prosper. They don't want to see you grow. They don't want to see you evolve. They know what you'll tolerate. Because the old you was comfortable. The new you stepping into uncomfortable. And the old version, people knew how to talk, they knew what you would tolerate. They knew what buttons to push. They knew how to get the old you to respond. But what happens when the old you isn't there anymore? What happens when you start saying, no, I can't, I won't, and I'm not? What happens when you start setting boundaries? What happens when you stop explaining every decision you make? What happens when you stop chasing people? What happens when you stop begging people to understand you when you feel misunderstood? What happens when you finally realize that you don't have to convince anybody to see your worth? That's growth. And growth can be very uncomfortable. Not just for the people around you, but for you too. Because sometimes you miss the old version of yourself. You miss the people you used to be around. You miss the memories. You miss the way things used to be. But here's something I've learned. Missing something doesn't always mean you need to go back to it. I need y'all to read that again. Read that again in your spirit. Just because you miss somebody doesn't mean they're supposed to have access to you again. Just because you share history doesn't mean you have to share your future. And just because somebody was there for you in one season doesn't mean they're automatically entitled to a seat in the next one. And listen, that's a hard lesson because some of us have spent years holding on to a relationship simply because of history. We've said, but I've known them forever. That's my family, that's my people, that's my folks, that's my best friend. We've been through so much together. We've been through a lot. But sometimes we're holding on to the history of a relationship while ignoring the reality of it. And that's where we have to, be honest with ourselves. Ask yourself, does this relationship still have a healthy place in my life? Not how long I've known this person. Not what we've been through. Not what are people going to say if I walk away. But does this relationship align with the person I'm becoming? Because sometimes the answer is right there. Simply no. And that is okay. Listen, it may hurt. It may feel lonely. It may take some time to accept. But sometimes letting go isn't a punishment. Letting go is a part of the healing. And that's where we're going to go a little deeper. Because I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people, us, struggle with when they begin to outgrow people. The guilt. Why do we feel guilty for becoming who we prayed to become? Why do we feel guilty for wanting peace? Why do we feel guilty for setting boundaries? Why do we feel guilty when we finally choose ourselves? Wanna know why? Because sometimes we have been so used to putting everybody else first that when we finally put ourselves on the list, we feel selfish. And we're going to talk about that today. Choosing yourself. And I think that's something we all really need to talk about. Because some of us been taught our whole lives that choosing ourselves is selfish. We were taught to be there for everybody. Be the strong one. Be the understanding one. Be the one who forgives. Be the one who keeps the peace. Be the one who gives people another chance and another chance and another chance and another chance until eventually you look up and realize you've been giving so much of yourself away that there's barely anything left for you. And then when you finally say, you know what? I need to choose me. Suddenly, you the selfish one. No. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't love people. It doesn't mean, like they feelings don't matter. Choosing yourself means you finally understand that you matter too. Your feelings matter, your peace matter, your mental health, your mental space matters, your future matters, and your purpose matters. And sometimes choosing yourself means creating a boundary. It means saying no. It means taking a step back. It means having a difficult conversation. And sometimes it means walking away. But here's where I want us to be honest. Because I don't want anybody listening to this episode thinking, well, I guess I've outgrown everybody. No ma'am. No sir. Because sometimes the problem isn't that we've outgrown somebody. Sometimes we're avoiding accountability. Sometimes we're running from people who are trying to tell us something we don't want to hear. Sometimes we're calling it protecting my peace when really we are refusing to have an uncomfortable conversation. And I've learned that too. Growth isn't always about leaving people behind. Sometimes growth means learning how to communicate better, some apologizing, listening. Sometimes it just means admitting, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Holding that accountability. Because real growth isn't just changing the people around you. Real growth changes you. And that's how you know there's a difference between outgrowing somebody and simply wanting to escape accountability. When you truly grow, you become more honest with yourself. You start asking, am I really, am I really at peace? Am I really setting a healthy boundary, or am I building a wall? Am I walking away because this relationship is unhealthy, or because I'm afraid to deal with the problem? Am I growing, or am I just trying to avoid being uncomfortable? Those are hard questions, because sometimes the hard questions are the ones that help us grow the most. And here's another thing. Not everybody is going to understand your growth, and you have to be okay with that. People may say, you changed, and you know what? They're right. You have changed. That's the point. That's your point. You weren't supposed to stay the same person forever, was you? Listen, you lived, you've experienced things, you've been hurt, you've healed or still in the healing process, you've learned, you're still learning, you've cried, you prayed, you've fallen down, you've gotten back up. So of course you're different. And if somebody only loves the version of you that never had boundaries, the version of you that always said yes, the version of you that stayed quiet, the version of you that accepted less, then maybe they're not having a problem with you changing. They're having a problem with you no longer being easy to control. Listen, and that's a whole different conversation. But here's the beauty part. Here's the beautiful part in that. Here's the good part. When you start letting go of what no longer fits, you create a space. Space for peace, space for healing, space for new relationships, space for new opportunities, space for your purpose. And sometimes you have to be willing to sit in that empty space for a little while, because being alone for a season is better than being surrounded by people who constantly make you feel alone. Read that again. Listen to that again. And I know it can be scary. I know it can hurt. Sometimes people you're afraid to lose are the very people you are going to have to release in order to find yourself. And that's when you realize you didn't lose them. You found you. Look, let me tell you something. Let me tell y'all something. I'm not standing here talking to you like I have everything figured out. I'm talking to you from experience. Because when I think about outgrowing people, for me, it really started back in 2017. Before my son was murdered. I feel like, I was still the old T. I was still showing up for people. I was repping my neighborhood. I was, repping my friends, wanting to be around, wanting to be included. Had people in my life that I had known for 15 years, 20 plus years. These weren't just people I casually knew. These was like people, we was locked in, if you call it. These were people I consider my close friends. These were people I had history with. Lots of history. Lots and lots of history. And then listen, something tragic happened that changed my entire life. My son was murdered. And when you experience something that changes your life like that, you don't come out on the other side the same person. I don't care what nobody say. You just don't. And at first, I don't even think I realized how much I was changing. But as the years started going by, started noticing things. I noticed that some of the people I had been so connected to weren't showing up for me in ways I expected them to. The phone calls wasn't coming in like they used to. The check-in started slowing down. And I'm not saying everybody owed me something, because ain't nobody was obligated to do anything. But when you've spent years being there for people, loving people, supporting people, showing up for people, you notice when that same energy isn't coming back to you, you eventually I started isolating. I started detaching. I wasn't necessarily making some big announcements. Like, I'm done with everybody. Nah, I wasn't doing all that. I just started pulling back. And then life took another turn. I got married. And once I got married, I started noticing another shift. A lot of people I had been surrounded by were living completely different lifestyles than I was. Some were married, some weren't. Some were going into different directions. And I started realizing that my life was changing. My husband was there for me through some of my most very vulnerable times. And I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when somebody really loves you and is there for you. And that made me look at some of my other relationships differently. Not because I suddenly thought I was better than anybody, but because I started asking myself, what do I want my relationship to look like? What kind of people do I want around me? What kind of energy do I want in my life? And I started making different choices. I stopped going certain places. I stopped interacting with certain people. I started detaching from the things that I've been so comfortable with for so long. It was so hard. But look, let me tell you, that was uncomfortable. It was. Because creating a new life when you've been comfortable in your old life for years, that's scary. You're reinventing yourself. You're figuring out who you are. Like who you are now. You trying to step into this new person, you know? I'm trying to step into this new woman. And even though you know you're moving in different directions, there are still moments when you want to go back. Like, you know, I had those moments. I want to be around my old friends. I want to go back in my old neighborhood. I want to be around people I've been knowing for years because that was familiar. But every time I went back, it didn't feel the same. The energy wasn't the same. The conversations weren't the same. And eventually, I realized that it wasn't necessary that everything around me had changed. I had changed. And that's when I really started understanding what it means to outgrow people. Because sometimes you keep trying to go back to a place that you have already outgrown, grown up out of that. And you keep trying to recreate a feeling that existed in the older, the older version of yourself. And you just can't. You can't make it click. Because you're not that person anymore. I'm not that person anymore. Listen, as years went by, I noticed that some of the conversations weren't aligned with the direction I was going. The things that used to interest me didn't interest me anymore. The places I used to want to be didn't feel like places I needed to be anymore. And instead of me forcing myself to fit into something that I no longer felt right in, I removed myself. I sat back, I observed, and I started paying attention to the people who were actually there. And what I realized was the people who are meant to be in my life are still here. The people who truly loves me are still here. The people who genuinely care about me are still here. And some of the people I spent years with, some people I gave so much of myself to, they're not here anymore. And you know what? I learned to be okay with that. Because sometimes we think losing people means we lost something. But losing people is how you discover who is really meant to stay. And I had to learn that everybody who was part of my past didn't have to be a part of my future. That doesn't erase the memories. It doesn't at all. It doesn't erase the love that I've had for people. It doesn't erase the years, the history, the time. It just means that their chapter in my life just ended. But my story kept going. And that's the thing about purpose through pain. Sometimes the pain changes you. The pain reopens your eyes. The pain forces you to step away from what was familiar and build something new. The person you become after pain wouldn't even have existed without going through what you had to go through. Listen, I'm still here, I'm still becoming, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, but I know this much. I'm not the same T I was in 2017, and I'm not supposed to be, because where you start isn't where you're going to finish. And if you're listening to me right now, I want you to think about your own life. Think about the people you've had to let go of. Think about relationships that changed. Think about the people you thought would be in your life forever. And maybe some of them aren't there anymore. You don't even talk to them anymore. Maybe you outgrew, maybe you grew apart. Maybe you had to create a boundary, right? Maybe you just simply had to walk away. And maybe you're still feeling guilty about it. But I want you to remember this. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to want something different. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to choose yourself. And you don't have to apologize for becoming the person you prayed to become. Everybody is not going to understand your journey. And that's okay. Everybody has to, everybody doesn't have to understand it. It's your journey. It's your life. And sometimes God will remove people from your life that you never thought you have to live without. And at first you may not understand why. You may cry. You see, I still get choked up. I still get emotional. You may eventually you may even go back. You question it. But sometimes what feels like a loss is actually making room for something greater. So don't be afraid of the empty space. Don't be afraid of starting over. Don't be afraid of becoming somebody new. Sometimes the person you're becoming requires you to release the person you used to be. And that's growth. So if you're in a season right now and you're realizing that some relationships don't fit anymore, don't beat yourself up. Just take a step back. Be honest with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Communicate when communication is needed. Set the boundaries you need to set. And if you have to walk away with love. You don't have to hate somebody to leave them behind. You don't have to make them feel like a villain. You don't have to make yourself feel like the villain. Sometimes you could just simply say, I love you, but I can't go where I'm going and stay where I've been, because your next chapter deserves room. Your healing deserves the room. Your peace deserves the room. And your purpose definitely deserves the room. And that's what I want to leave with you today. Sometimes you don't outgrow people because they're bad people. You outgrow people because you're becoming a different person. Don't shrink yourself to keep people comfortable. Don't keep going backwards just because you're afraid to move forward. Don't confuse familiarity with purpose. Some people were assigned to a chapter. Some people were assigned to a season. And some people, they're going to be there for the whole journey. Learn the difference. And most importantly, learn to trust yourself when something no longer feels right. Because sometimes your spirit knows before your mind is ready to accept it. Believe that. That gut feeling and that feeling you get, of uncertainty, it's telling you, Remember, you didn't lose everybody. You just discovered who was really there. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. And sometimes the greatest thing that comes out of your pain is the person you become on the other side of it all. If this episode touched you in any way, I want you to sit with it. Think about the relationships the relationships in your life. Think about what you outgrown. Think about what you're holding on to simply because it's familiar. And ask yourself, does this still belong in my life I'm building? And whatever your answer is, give yourself permission to be honest. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing my episodes. Thank you for supporting Purpose Through Pain. And if this conversation spoke to you, share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Please share it. And I need y'all to start commenting. I need y'all to start liking. Please, it doesn't cost. I need y'all to engage. I really do. I want to build a community here. Because you just never know what somebody else is going through behind closed doors. And maybe this episode is exactly what somebody needed today. Until next time, remember, where you start is not where you're going to finish. I'm your girl, T. This is Purpose Through Pain. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next episode.